Hi everyone, welcome back to another What I Eat in a Day. Here's what I had to eat one day this week, featuring a few cozy winter recipes for you to also try. I often make rice pudding for breakfast, but I did a little something different this time, and I did half rice pudding, half porridge. So this is my vanilla oat and rice pudding with caramelised banana. For this, I measured out a cup of plant milk and gently brought that to a boil in a pan. I then took this pudding rice from Biona Organic, measured out a third of a cup of that and added that into the warm milk. I then just gave it a good stir through, and that needs 20 minutes to cook. So I just placed the lid on and let it do its thing. Meanwhile, I made the caramelised banana. This is so easy. I just peeled and sliced a banana in half lengthways. I then brushed a frying pan with a little coconut oil. I placed in the 2 banana halves and I just fried those off for a few minutes on a medium-high heat until they began to caramelise. I then brushed on some coconut nectar and just left those on a low heat to continue cooking. I next measured out a third of a cup of porridge oats and added that into the pan with the pudding rice. I mixed that through and just allowed it to cook until the oats were done. I then turned off the heat and added in some vanilla yoghurt. Stirred that through until it was nice and creamy, and the end result is this really thick rice and oat pudding. I then placed the warm caramelised bananas on top and also dusted over some ground cinnamon. This is such a great winter warmer breakfast. It's so cozy and comforting. The pudding is creamy. It's obviously somewhere between like a rice pudding and porridge texture wise. I love the vanilla yoghurt stirred through it, and the warm, sticky, caramelised cinnamon bananas on top work so nicely with it all. But you could also do this with some stewed cinnamon apple on the top, some warm blueberries, or just warm mixed berries. There's a few different ways that you could mix this up, but this is definitely my favourite. For lunch, I made this kind of open breakfast sandwich. I first roasted a couple of tomatoes, so I sliced 2 medium-sized vine tomatoes in half. I then placed those in a baking dish with 3 cloves of garlic. These were whole cloves of garlic with the skins still on. Next, I drizzled over some extra virgin olive oil and then seasoned it really well with some sea salt and some cracked black pepper as well. I then gave the dish a little bit of a shake just to coat the tomatoes, and then that went in my preheated oven at 180 degrees Celsius for around 25 minutes. Whilst those were in the oven roasting, I took a good handful of chestnut mushrooms. I just cut those up into quarters, and then I threw them into a frying pan with some oil, and I just fried those off for a good 5 minutes or so, then left them to continue cooking. Meanwhile, I made a kind of sauce / dressing, which I've loved making. It's basically just 3 tablespoons of tahini mixed with 1 tablespoon of red wine vinegar, and then also half a teaspoon of sumac. I just add all of those together in a small bowl and then give it a good mix through. Once the mushrooms were fully cooked off, I then added in a couple of teaspoons of vegan pesto. I usually make my own pesto, but here I just use some store-bought vegan pesto. I always get asked why pesto isn't vegan, and it's because it's got Parmesan cheese in it, but there are some amazing vegan options out there. I mixed that through the mushrooms well just to coat them all, and then next I took a couple of slices of rye bread, popped them in the toaster to toast, and then once they were done, I spread a thick layer of hummus on each slice. I had also then sliced up a small avocado, and so I put half of the avocado on each slice of toast. Next, I removed the roasted tomatoes from the oven. They should look really lovely and caramelized almost. And then all I did was squeeze the garlic cloves, still in their skins, over the tomatoes. I just used a fork then to mash it into the tomatoes. I popped the roasted garlic tomatoes on the plate too, And then I took the pesto mushrooms and added those on top. Lastly, I took that sumac tahini and drizzled some over the top. There was some left, but I've also been using this with things like falafels stuffed in pita breads, as a dip for falafels, on salads. There's lots of different ways you can use it, so I just tend to store it in the fridge. And then I just added some fresh basil on the top. This is such a good lunch, but it would also work so well as a breakfast or brunch too. There's just so many flavours, from the roasted tomato with the roasted garlic, the pesto on the mushrooms, and the sumac tahini sauce. This might not be for everyone. Tahini is always a little bit bitter in my opinion, but I find the sumac and red wine vinegar sweeten it a little bit. But you could also put some maple syrup in too. I really love it on savoury things, as I think it works really well, and especially with all of these other flavours. You could also add some spinach into this open sandwich. Some hemp seeds would be nice on top, as well as some pumpkin seeds for a bit of a crunch. Later in the afternoon, I opened a door on my Bed and Blend tea advent calendar. You guys know this is my favourite tea brand, and this year they've done both ready-made and customisable advent calendars. I got to customise my own, and as well as tea in this advent calendar, there's also a few of their matches behind some of the doors. And on this day, I opened up one of their salted caramel matches, which I hadn't tried from them before, and all of the matches that I've tried from them have been amazing. They even have an ice cream flavour matcha. I made a matcha latte with this, so I put some of the matcha in a bowl and then I whisked it up using my matcha whisk with a little oat milk. I then heated up a glassful of oat milk in a small pan. I poured the matcha paste I'd created in the cup, and then I just gently brought the milk up to a boil. As a snack, I also grabbed one of these Trek protein flapjacks. I talk about these flapjacks all the time, but they are honestly one of my favourites. They are the best, chewiest, most flavourful flapjacks I've ever had, and each one contains 9 grams of protein too. Here I had the cocoa coconut, which is a coconut flapjack with a chocolate layer on the top, and also cocoa oat, which is an oat flapjack with a chocolate layer. They are perfect for an afternoon energy boost. Once the milk had heated through, I then poured that into my glass too. I gave it a good stir through, and I always just like to sprinkle some more matcha powder over the top for extra flavour as well. This salted caramel matcha was so delicious. I love that it slightly sweetens the matcha and you can really taste the salted caramel in it. I always use Oatly barista milk for my matchas because it's really creamy and also froths really nicely, but I also find it's the best milk to work with matcha. And it was really nice with the Trek flapjack too. These, as I said, are just so soft and chewy. They're not too sweet, but if you're feeling something sweet, they're such a great snack, and the chocolate layer on these is just so incredibly good. For dinner, I made a lentil and mushroom stew. I first heated a tablespoon of oil in a large shallow pan on a medium heat, and then I finely diced a medium white onion. I added the onion to the pan, and whilst that was frying off, I then minced 3 cloves of garlic. I added those into the pan with the onion and just cooked that all off for around 3 minutes until the onions were translucent and the garlic had softened. Next, I chopped up 2 sticks of celery. I then added that to the pan and again cooked that down until soft. After a few minutes, I then added in around 2 spoonfuls of brown rice flour. I then stirred that through the pan to coat everything in it. I next added in a teaspoon of dried mixed herbs. I then took 4 sprigs of fresh thyme and just pulled the leaves off and then added those into the pan. I also added in 1 large sprig of fresh rosemary that I had finely chopped, 2 small bay leaves, and then 1/4 cup of tomato puree. I then just mixed everything through what was already in the pan, And to get everything well coated in the tomato puree, I then cooked that off for a few more minutes. Next, I sliced up the remaining chestnut mushrooms that were left over from lunch, and I added those to the pan, and then I sliced up another 250 grams of Faricio mushrooms, so it was 300 grams of mushrooms in total. And then I added those to the pan too. I then turned the mushrooms through everything in the pan, again getting them well coated in the mixture of it all. I then added in a splash of boiling water just to get everything moving and to lift anything on the bottom of the pan. I cooked the mushrooms for around 10 minutes before then adding in 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, 2 tablespoons of vegan Worcester sauce. This is the one that I always use, I always get asked. 1 teaspoon of Marmite. This is optional, but it really does add so much richness and a depth to the overall flavour. And then I poured in 1 litre of vegetable stock, and finally seasoned it well with some sea salt and some cracked black pepper. I gave that all a really good stir through, brought it up to a boil so it was gently bubbling, and then I reduced the heat and placed the lid on for around 25 minutes. After 25 minutes I removed the lid. It was a lovely thick and rich gravy at this point. I just lowered the heat more and allowed that to continue cooking. Meanwhile, I made some cauliflower mashed potato. I first filled a medium pan with some boiling water. I then had peeled and chopped 5 small potatoes, so I added those into the water. I then cut up half a head of cauliflower into florets. I used my little steam hack here to cook these, so I put a sieve over the pan, placed the cauliflower in it, and then just popped the lid on to allow everything to cook for around 20 minutes. Whilst those were cooking, I trimmed some green beans. And then once both the cauliflower and potatoes were soft, I then placed them in a large bowl. I rinsed and drained a can of green lentils. Then I put those in the stew, mixed them through, and allowed that to continue cooking. I had saved the water in the pan from the potatoes, so I then placed the green beans in the sieve to steam. To the bowl of cauliflower and potato, I added a cup of oat milk, 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard, and I seasoned it really well with some sea salt and cracked black pepper. You could mash this up with a potato masher if you wanted, but for a really smooth mash, which I personally prefer, I used a handheld blender until it was really smooth. I then removed the bay leaves from the stew and then first divided up the mash between our bowls, and then I served up the stew. This actually made 4 portions, so I froze what was left. Then once the green beans were done, I placed those on the side, and then I just garnished it with some more fresh thyme over the top. This is one of my favourite comforting winter dinners. I've actually shared a few variations of this, I think. It's so warming and cosy. It's full of flavour and goodness too. You could also have this over a jacket potato as well. That's another way that I like to enjoy it. But you just can't beat a bowl of mash with this stew. And to get another vegetable in there, I like to throw some cauliflower into the mash. I also had some vegan horseradish sauce. This was from Aldi, so I placed some of that on the side, and that was really lovely with it too. It gave it a little bit of heat. You could also have this with some peas on the side, some steamed broccoli, or some sautéed cabbage. Those would all work really great. And like I said, any leftovers of this can be frozen, and I would suggest using it up within a month. Then after dinner, I just had a few squares of Divine's 85% dark chocolate with refreshing lemon. Who am I kidding? I ate half the bar. I always keep my chocolate in the fridge so it's nice and cold. I adore Divine's vegan chocolate. It comes in so many different flavours, from dark chocolate with raspberry, dark chocolate with mint, dark chocolate with blueberry and quinoa. They are all so delicious, but I hadn't tried their dark chocolate with lemon before. It's 85% dark chocolate, so it's intense and rich, but the lemon in it really does make it so refreshing, and the combination of the two is really delicious. Not to mention how smooth this chocolate is too. I will link to some of Divine's other vegan flavours in the description box below for you to go and check out. That is it for another day on my plate. I really hope you enjoyed this video. The recipes are written up in the description box below for you as always. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!